Welcome to the U3 Media Podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee. I'm Christy Ross, and joining us today is Laura Sommers, founder of Simply Good Coffee. Welcome, Laura. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So you have been around, I'm going to say around the coffee industry for over 30 years, and recently launched your company called Simply Good Coffee, which manufactures and distributes a new at-home brewer to the market. So at this point in your career, what was the driver behind the decision to start a brand new company?
Well, it had to do with meeting a need that I saw out there in the market, which is kind of like the gap between what we experience brewing coffee as coffee professionals and people who have been in the industry and what the consumer is experiencing in their home. There's been a kind of lack of education for the consumer about what actually creates a great cup of coffee and what's necessary. And so, my greatest concern, or one of the reasons that I started the company, is I have a lot of friends in the coffee business, and I want each and every one of them to be wildly successful. And that, requires growing our industry. It requires bringing more people in, being an evangelist for home coffee brewing, which I don't think is, it's not going to impact people's going to the coffee shops and having that experience. So really it's about taking the message that we have and the experience we have and simplifying it so that it doesn't seem intimidating and bringing more people in. And basically over my career, I have seen when people experience really good coffee for the first time out of a home brewer and they're like, this is like really good. I'm like, yeah, and it's super easy. You saw, nothing special happened. I just pushed the button. So that's really, kind of what it is. The wanting to grow specialty coffee and at the same time realizing there are a lot of people who would truly appreciate having this in their home and they're just unaware of how to get it or how easy it is.
So one of the things you said, Laura, which I think you are spot on, there is actually an incredible gap between what the industry views or understands as a great cup of coffee and what the end consumer truly understands in how to acquire that coffee or how to brew it themselves. Just the education alone, I totally agree with. It's much needed.
Well, and we've kind of made it seem complicated and difficult.
Yeah.
And really it's not complicated or difficult.
Right.
If you have the right equipment.
Right. And we're gonna talk about that in more detail in a little bit. But for a second, I want to go back to the beginning because you founded Espresso Supply, which was one of the best known coffee supply companies in the industry for literally a quarter of a century or more. What are some of the biggest milestones that you watched unfold over that time frame?
Well, and it's been a super interesting time to be in business due to the complete overhaul of technology and what it means to be in business over the last 25 years. The changes that we've experienced are simply unprecedented for how to be in business and what's required today that's different than what was required. So I started in 93 at a time where the state of the art for a business was a carbon UPS book and an 800 number. And people sent things in the mail, they wrote orders, they put it in the mail, they attached a check. I mean, it's funny because to me, it's not long ago, but it's forever ago at the same time. It's like when we used to ask our grandparents, like, well, what was it like before electric lights? It's really, really interesting. And as Espresso Supply grew, so it grew along with the specialty coffee industry overall, and it grew along with technological improvements and improvements in transportation. So what we have today is totally an outgrowth of all those, industries coming together And we're really unique in that I don't know of another industry that has so many kind of brick and mortar doors that has evolved, in the last 25 years that isn't kind of technology centered or technology focused or built around technology. I mean, this is an in-person business. People are serving people, and there's no virtual cup of coffee. It's hot.
Right.
Someone gives it to you. You make it yourself. It's not available online in any capacity. So it's
Yeah.
it's a super interesting industry and its evolution. One of the things that's been interesting to see occurring kind of repeatedly, almost in a cycle, is incredible skepticism about the continued growth of specialty coffee.
Mhm.
And, in the beginning, I started a supply company, which is just in the beginning. It's pitchers, thermometers, tampers, kind of support of an espresso machine. Because people were opening cafes and the stuff was hard to get. And people are like, are you kidding? A, no one's going to go to those crazy cafes that are opening. And B, you'll never live as a supply company. It's just too small. And so I've seen basically people's skeptical assessments of our industry and our ability to grow soundly, proven to be incorrect over time. And we've had an arc of improved quality, which I believe is what's driven people to the cafes and created the success of the, specialty cafe. And I don't know why they wouldn't embrace that same quality improvement in their homes if they had the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's coming, though. I feel like that's coming.
It's funny too, because sometimes in specialty coffee, we've had such extraordinary growth that when people are assessing the market, they turn and they look backwards. And they say, well, we've had so much growth. How can we have more? And my point is, there are 491 million cups of coffee consumed every day. I think there is plenty of room for growth. It's like we've kind of started up the mountain and we feel like, oh, we're kind of tired. So we look back at how far we've gone, and we're not necessarily looking up to the top of the mountain and
Right.
how far we can still climb.
Well, in talking about looking forward, I want to go back to 1993 because at that time you were like at the leading edge of sort of the online marketplace. When you look at the internet and that time frame, I want to first talk about that technology and how you stayed ahead of all those changes and adapt your business really with an increasingly global market at that time.
Well, I mean, it was funny because I'm super excited about the fact that I started basically a pre-technology business, and now I'm starting kind of what I call a post-technology business. I mean, it was challenging in the old days because everything was moving constantly. There was no plug and play. Everything had to be like you had to build your own PCs. Our first computer didn't even network with a second workstation. A great opportunity to come back with all the technology advances that we've had and start a company with those fully baked into the strategy, into the operations. I mean, honestly, much of the time at Espresso Supply, our website took orders and then a person re-entered those orders into our business software, our ERP, which
Yeah.
is terrible. No one's doing that today at Simply Good Coffee, I assure you.
Right. Yeah. Nobody's doing that. I don't feel like anybody's doing that anywhere, but I'm sure there are some. I'm sure there are some. So is Espresso Supply still in business? And if not, like what happened? And did the pandemic have anything to do with that?
Well, the pandemic had something to do with everything, I think. And, to some degree, we were fortunate. I felt very badly for people who are in, coffee shop business. And one day they're in business and the government comes along and the next day they're not. And that completely shuts off, cash flow. I mean, there's employees to consider, just an extremely difficult time, but really something that undermined the importance of the web as well, an online business, and how, having more than one, source of revenue, but kind of through that, and I know I'm a little off topic, but I'll come back. Through that process, I sort of realized there's not enough of us to buy each other's coffee to keep everyone in business. Like, we need more people purchasing the good coffee.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very challenging if people buy it and they brew it on an underpowered brewer and it's either sour or because it's under extracted or it's bitter, it's over extracted. They don't become repeat customers. Like, we've got to get them, getting good results in their cup. But let's see, let me go back to your original question, which was espresso supply. So, yeah, it was a 26-year-old business and had grown substantially. I think people need to keep in mind that not every business is intended to be forever. Certainly, it was my plan to continue to work that business and be in that business. It wasn't, I'll put it differently, it wasn't my intention to start a new business in my early 60s. So.
Okay. But you did do it. Okay. So what was the one thing you took from espresso supply that you now have applied to your new business?
Yes. Well, it was the knowledge and the personal experience about this gap that we have addressed. And so if you bring out a coffee brewer that brews really good coffee, like we have, people tend to want to pigeonhole it into a specialty coffee, like, oh, it's a specialty coffee brewer. It's for specialty coffee people. I'm like, no, all those people know how to brew coffee. They have untold numbers of, pour over setups. They've got much more expensive equipment that can do a lot more. This is for people who like good coffee, want to enjoy good coffee, but really, they do not want to become specialty coffee professionals. And I think that is a huge number of individuals who, when given the opportunity, will choose this. So it's kind of been hard to, I want to be meeting the specialty coffee standards of brewing and yet be taking that message out to the larger world, because there's, people, so for what people use at home, 41% of people brew on a drip brewer at home. Another 28% of people brew on a Keurig or a pod-based system. And so if you add those two together, there's 69% of people probably brewing on a 900 to 1100 watt heater or in a little plastic pot.
And what is the proper wattage that it should be?
You should have 1400 watts or higher. 1400 watts is the minimum, I would say, to get good coffee. And you'll find that all the SCA certified machines are in that. And I found, well, of course, you were at CoffeeCon in Chicago when I was. And so it's always great fun for me to talk to people all day and kind of understand what moves the needle for them, or what is the information that they value. And I found that one thing they really appreciate is having that piece of information that they could check with their home brewers.
Right.
It is a little concrete thing. It's like, oh, if your brewer is under that, it's not going to do it. So that's been much more effective in conversations with consumers. Kind of once you start talking about, oh, the ideal temperature, and they're like, they're like, wah wah wah. They just, they're like, I don't know how to judge that. So how do I know?
They want something concrete. You're spot on. They want something they can just go to and say, do I have it or I don't have it? So you highlight basically some of these things that are really important for the end customer. What are some of the other things from your market research that you discovered and part of the reason you focused on designing this particular brewer this way?
Basically hitting a couple, things that are well known to us, which is that bad flavors are not the fault of the coffee for the most part. The
But
bad
most people
flavors.
think that they go to the coffee first if there's something wrong.
100%. And I kind of learned this in reverse is because when I would give somebody a good cup of coffee, they'd be like, oh, what kind of coffee is it? Like, whose coffee is it? And they thought by purchasing that coffee, they could replicate it at home. And of course, there's nothing worse than someone saying, okay, I'm invested. I'm going to get myself some good coffee and enjoy it at home, and then have these terrible, disappointing results that have nothing to do with the coffee. And they don't, it's funny because I tell people, coffee brewing is based on science. There is a scientific foundation. It's been known since the 50s. It's not recent, and it requires just a few things, but it's science, but it's not rocket science. You don't have to set the temperature of your brewer every time to just have great coffee. So I think trying to move the focus on the bad flavors away from the coffee and, onto the brewer is a very important thing that we all, can champion. The other thing that was really interesting too at CoffeeCon and when I'm with consumers is I take the lid off the filter basket and I let them watch the bloom process, which they find completely fascinating. They're like, look at it, like it's growing. And then I explain, well, gases are rushing out, like, and your water is waiting to go in to extract, the coffee till after those gases have rushed out. I'm like, you can't enter an elevator until the people have gotten off. Like if a full elevator arrives, you just have to wait. And that's the same way the water has to wait to get in till, all that has gone on.
So, Laura, that is a great analogy, actually, because one of the things that your brewer does that other traditional brewers don't do is it allows for the bloom process, right? So to talk about that, because I think you have a toggle switch there. Who would really want to not use the bloom process? Like, why create it with a toggle?
Well, because, we like to give people as many options as possible. I guess if you were not using fresh coffee, it might not be necessary. It allows them to turn it on and then brew with it off or see kind of how that process works.
Yeah, so really quickly, when you're creating a product, you obviously have to design it. You have to find a manufacturer. Like, what are some of the first steps you took to go out and find an actual manufacturer for this product, or even the designer for that matter?
Well, I mean, I've been in this business for 10 years, so for me, it's easier to do those sort of things because you work with people over time, you understand who is aligned and how you like to work. It's easier and easier to purchase imported products. In the old days, in the super old days, somebody had to like get a backpack and go trekking around. And, now anyone really in the United States who's selling products, they will likely get contacted by someone in China who's manufacturing products. So it's kind of flipped from the, people who want to produce having to find the, manufacturers are now looking for, because as much as we have a supply chain concern about keeping the supply chain flowing, they have concerns like they want to keep the factories busy.
What challenges did you encounter by manufacturing overseas versus manufacturing here in the US?
Well, it's definitely manufacturing in the US is always an attractive option. It's just it's much more costly at this point, and trying to figure out how to manage that because it's I've been in consumer products for a while and I've put products through major retailers, and we had a product, it was a little plastic reusable cup for the Keurig, which actually was the center of all that litigation. And it was very simple. We had plastic injection molding in Seattle, Washington area that just pumped them out. We used, local labor for the packaging and the prep and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, we faced huge uphill battles on that small product in competing with imported products on price. And people are very, they're vocal about having products made in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
but when they actually cost more, some of that enthusiasm evaporates. It's very tough. Well, basically, the problem is the competition. You're competing with lower priced products. And that's what's promoted by every retailer in America today.
You mentioned basically the K-cups, right? The pods. And you also mentioned, I think you said 28% of consumers in the US are buying pods or consuming coffee through pods. So with the rise of this single serve K-cups, has that changed your approach to marketing at all?
Well, I mean, the K-cup, the pod brewing, I'll call it, because there's more than one than the K-cup, is not they started probably in 2010. 2011 is when the brand, EcoBrew, was first, hitting the market. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, if you think back in the evolution, they introduced this incredibly convenient brewing method. And does it taste worse than a 900-watt brewer? It maybe doesn't. So, they benchmarked against a very low flavor profile. Mm-hmm. And so, all things considered, if your coffee's not good and you've got a 900-watt brewer and your coffee's not good and you have a little plastic pod, does it really matter to you, if you don't want to mess around with it? And I believe that system was actually designed to meet an office coffee need, where you have a lot of different people using, office coffee machines. And I think that they totally kind of got lucky that it was adopted for the home market as well. But there's more issues with that than just the flavor of the coffee. You think about the shipping and the use of fossil fuel to drive those things around. They're hugely inefficient because it's a square box full of these round plastic capsules, which are mostly air. There's air all around in the box because it's not square things in a square box. So the volume to fill a truck is, disproportionate to the weight of what's being shipped. And of course, on the grocery store shelves, they're huge. And they don't produce very much coffee. And the most interesting thing is the consumers are very surprised to discover that the coffee is pre-staled before it goes in there. They're like, "Are you kidding?" I'm like, "No, because your coffee, when you buy it, has a valve. And those things don't have a valve because they have to wait till that action's over to seal them up." So, and I think people are interested in moving on, but they're a little confused about how to do it or what to do. So I think we have plenty of work to do to meet this convenience, desire. But the other thing that is crazy with consumers is because these 900-watt brewers have been around, they take 12 minutes to make coffee. And so it's created a belief that brewing coffee takes a long time, and they don't have that long. It probably takes as long to brew carafe or a half carafe in the SimplyGoodCoffee brewer as it does to warm up your pod brewer and brew a single capsule.
Yeah. Convenience and immediate gratification is how the world works today, I feel like. So when I look at your company, when you look at where you stand today versus where you want to be in 5 or 10 years, when will you be coming out with any other kinds of equipment in the coming years?
We'll be taking what we've learned from consumers to, improve our product, to possibly look at, other coffee brewers to bring out. We don't have plans for a grinder because grinding, I don't want to say grinding is serious business, but it really is. And it's, you know, we're trying to keep our focus in just doing one thing. And it does create some complications, and I'm, you know, kind of working to understand, because the two are incredibly related. Grinding and brewing go hand in hand, especially for us. You know, that's just natural. But understanding the consumers don't feel the same way. I saw a guy pick up a really delicious bag of locally roasted coffee in Costco, because we have locally roasted specialty coffee in our Costco. And I'm like, oh, you're going to love it. Like, I just stand there and I sell the coffee all day long. Like, oh, that's best. You're going to totally good choice. Good for you. You're doing the right thing. You're just like, you're a champ. And he squeezes it and he's like, is it whole bean? And I'm like thinking that's a great thing. I'm like, yes, it is. He's like, oh, I don't want the mess. So understanding, you know, how to bring them along that path, whether you start them with pre-measured packets, whether you, and I mean, I know that you were, you know, kind of always on the table is the scale, which, you know, is a very off-putting discussion for consumers. So it's going to be something that we introduce, but it's vitally important. You know, the same amount of coffee, the same amount of water, the correct ratios are what make that sweet, delicious coffee. And, you know, that's just more education.
Well, let's talk about the coffee to water ratio as well. And even for your brewer, just share with the audience what that should be and what they should focus on.
Well, so, I mean, generally, I personally would do about 9 grams of coffee per cup. So, which also raises the question of the word cup. So, which is dumb. So the housewares industry will blame housewares. They're 100% responsible. In Europe, a cup is defined as 4 ounces. In America, it's 5 ounces, unless you're cooking and measuring, and then it's 8 ounces. It's dumb. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And at first I'm like, well, why don't we just say how many 8-ounce cups? And the salespeople are like, oh my God, it'll kill us. Because people compare, like, oh, this one's 8 cups, this one's 10 cups. And of course, the same brewer in America and in Europe is advertised as being more cups in Europe. It's 10 cups. So if you see a 10 cup brewer in Europe, it's an 8 cup brewer in the United States. So really the way to look at it is 40 ounces. So I would put in about 9 grams of coffee for 40, you know, for what, 8, you know, because that's 8 cups of coffee. So, and it kind of varies a little bit. And what people will find when they go down this path is that the scale is easier to manage in the end. I have a number of people that I've like required, like you have to use a scale. You know, you're close to me, none of this monkeying around, just use a scale. And they come back later, they say, oh my God, it's so easy. I thought it would be hard. And it just makes it so much easier to weigh it out because there's no understanding that the coffees are not similar by volume.
Right, exactly. So Laura, if you didn't go into coffee, what do you think you might have done?
Well, and it's kind of funny because I've gotten this question one time before, which made me think back. And honestly, I mean, I graduated from high school in 1978. There weren't a lot of career opportunities in 1978, to be honest. Not even when I went through college. I mean, we lacked all the kind of like marketing, branding paths. I mean, I did go to college. The degree that I got was an art degree. First, I had gotten an associate arts degree in apparel design. So I'm not sure if it might have been teaching, which is a very common career path for women in the 70s, you know, in the early 80s. Not really great at taking instruction, so I probably couldn't have been a very good secretary. But in terms of how our career opportunities have changed in 30 years is also, you know, pretty unbelievable. I think what would have been essential and is an essential through line to me no matter what I do is some level of creativity. So if I were able to have creative, and honestly, that's what I have found most rewarding in business is an opportunity to be creative. I mean,
Yeah.
there is no limit to creativity in business. It's absolutely essential.
Right. Well, you've built two businesses. So, what is one of the best things you've learned about actually building and running a company? Like maybe an aha moment for you that you can share with other entrepreneurs that would help them build their business?
Well, I think that, so there's a lot of different kinds of businesses. There's not just one kind. I mean, there are businesses that are run by MBAs that are like about managing, you know, inventory, money, that kind of thing. And I've kind of settled on the idea that I'm like a strategic entrepreneur. I am just interested in identifying, it's like thrift store shopping. I identify something no one else is interested in, take it home, spiff it up a little bit, and then like, oh, look at this great thing I found that was being undervalued. So I'm always looking for things that are undervalued by the market that I feel that my talents can increase that, the value of and the exposure through. I think it's really important to have that business, especially if you're an entrepreneurial person, that you absolutely are passionate about. Like, what is the thing that you would do even if you weren't being paid? What is the thing that you're doing? I mean, I know people for whom coffee is their side hustle, and they're some of the hardest working people I know. They're like at the farmers markets on the weekend. They're posting constantly on social media. They can't just put it down. So what is that thing that really, and it, I don't want to I don't want to say that it can't be something else that's kind of like a outcome from your business. One of the probably the primary driver for starting Espresso Supply was I had a young child and was having a family. So I needed employment that allowed me to have more flexibility, because this was before remote work was invented.
Right.
And
Right.
so, so that was a driver for me, which was a lifestyle. And I found a way to help people by giving them the tools that they need while providing me the lifestyle that I needed.
Right. Right. So, Laura, do you have a life motto or words that you live by?
It's kind of like it's more of a not necessarily philosophy, but distilling things down to the simplest elements. We let things get super complicated, and the complications distract us from what's at the foundation. So really, kind of putting aside the noise and everything, just getting down to the basics. So in this case, it's the basics of, delivering people great coffee and expanding the specialty coffee business. And, it doesn't need, I don't need to invent a new type of coffee brewing. It doesn't need, have a technology component put into coffee brewing. It's just really this kind of simple approach to things and distilling them to their essence, I'd say.
Right. Can you share a general coffee industry stat that you find interesting or fascinating?
I guess it has to do with coming back to what we've already talked about, is the wattage of the brewers is the most surprising thing that people are very surprised to learn this, because I mean, they buy these coffee brewers in good faith that it brews coffee, and to discover that it has no, there's no opportunity for that to happen, no matter how good the coffee you put in, is really disappointing and a disservice to the consumers, and really, undermines trust in coffee brewing marketing.
So, along those same lines, can you share a random, fascinating fact that most coffee consumers probably don't know?
I don't know. Maybe it is how difficult it is to run a coffee business in your neighborhood.
There you go.
It looks easy. It looks so easy. It can be, there's so much more to it. That's why I'm a total fanatic, whatever, for people who are getting up in the morning, opening the cafe, being there to serve us. You don't really know the headaches that they're going through on a daily business, especially if roasting is also involved. I mean, it looks like loads of fun, but I know for a fact it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work for sure. Okay, I am going to now do the U3 top 3, which requires very brief answers. So the very first one is your favorite brewing method.
You can guess. It's an automatic home coffee brewer.
For consumption, your coffee drink of choice.
I drink that coffee with a little half and half.
Okay, and how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
2 to 3.
2 to 3. Awesome. All right. So Laura, what I'd love for you to be able to do right now is provide that marketing pitch to the end consumer of why Simply Good Coffee is the brewer that they should be using.
Well, that would be because you will not be disappointed in the coffee. 100%. And I'm certainly an evangelist for this product. And anyone else who uses it, who has experience in coffee brewing, I encourage you to also be an evangelist and to be very inclusive and to bring more people into our industry so that we can continue to grow and take advantage of all the opportunities that are still out there. And if you've got friends, relatives, whatever, have them turn over their brewer. Look at the bottom. See what it says. It's written there in, very accessible, plain English about the quality of the brewer. And as we see more and more brewers meeting this standard, it's just going to revolutionize. So honestly, I want to make home coffee brewing on a brewer of 1400 or higher wattage. I mean, I want to make that the rule, not the exception.
And so your brewer emulates the pour over, allowing for the coffee to bloom, which is important, right? Yep. And it also is brewing at around 200 degrees, which fits the standards, right?
Yeah, the range is 195 to 205. And if you dig down through our FAQs on our webpage, you can actually find the test results from our outside third-party testing agency that verifies all the things that, that I say anywhere.
And Laura, where can somebody learn more about you and about Simply Good Coffee?
Of course, there's a website, SimplyGoodCoffee.com. We have partnered with specialty coffee businesses all over the country who have the brewer. So you might find one in your local area. And if you go into your local coffee brewer, where you buy your coffee and they don't have one, you could ask them about it because we have a great partnership program. I mean, I'm looking to find what I call trust partners who consumers trust for information, and then to promote the brewer through those avenues so that you're getting the recommendation from someone that you know and trust.
That is perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today, Laura, and of course for helping us unite the world through coffee.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Christy, for the opportunity. It's been fun.
Absolutely. And thanks to you, our followers, for joining us at U3 Coffee. We'll see you next time.